Hi everyone, welcome to your first video lesson. Your Core 4 teacher has given you the pink packet that will accompany this lesson. It is to be completed for class on Monday. What you do not get done in this class period becomes homework for you. Let's get started. You will be able to identify rates, table rates, graph rates, write an equation, and identify linear relationships by the end of completing this assignment. The assignment that I have given you is called Eating Rates and Linear Relationships, and you will see how this kind of covers everything we've done in the last week. Let me remind you that earlier this week we found our own walking rates by walking from the blue tape by Miss Symes' classroom to the blue tape by Miss Davin's classroom. We walked 10 meters in any given amount of seconds. So I'm going to use the example of 5 seconds. So setting my proportion up like this shows that I walked 10 meters in 5 seconds. So we used that to find our own walking rate. And in every 1 second, we would have walked 2 meters. So my walking rate is 2 meters per second. We use this walking rate then to plug it into our equation and to use it as that rate going back and forth and finding distances and finding times. Our equation that we used was D equals R times T, where D stands for distance, R stands for rate, and T stands for time. In this given problem, we know the rate. The rate is 2. So my equation that I would use to model this example would be D equals 2 times T. Knowing the rate, I could find the amount of time given a distance, or I would be able to determine the distance given any amount of time. So that's just a recap from what we did on Tuesday and Wednesday in class. Another thing we talked about this week that's going to be important to complete this packet are the notes that you took in your composition notebook titled Graphing. Remember that we use the x and y axis for graphing linear equations, where our x-axis is the horizontal, the y-axis is our vertical. And every time we have a graph, remember a quality graph has a title. A quality graph has labels on the x and the y-axis. More times than not, almost 100% of the time is on our x-axis. And in this case, using the example of meters per second, I would have second down below here. And y is what depends on x. And in the example I just gave, the distance, which we used as meters, depended on time. Your y variable always depends on your x variable. So when you're choosing what goes where on a table, like in our homework, you want to ask yourself which variable depends on the other. The one that depends on is up here, and the one being depended on is your x-axis. Here's our assignment. I need to apologize. For some reason, when I transferred the picture, which was crystal clear, onto this app, it kind of got blurry. So you'll notice it's a little blurry, but it will work. Let me just walk you through the first page before I send you off to do this on your own. The data was collected after a recent 2012 National Chicken Wing Eating Championship. You have 4 contestants and their eating rate. It shows how many wings they have eaten per every 1 minute. You're first asked to identify the 2 variables. So what are the 2 things being measured? There are 2 measurable things in the eating rate. What are they? And then down below, you're asked to complete the table for each student of showing the amount of wings eaten for 0 to 10 minutes. Don't forget that it starts at 0. 0 does count, and this goes all the way to 10. On the second page, you're asked to graph each student's data. You need to label each axis with the appropriate variables and also use the same scale for each graphs. This also comes from our quality notes that we took, or our quality graph notes that we took in our composition notebook. You know your two variables are going to be wings and minutes. So you need to ask yourself, does the amount of wings you eat depend on the amount of time you are given, or does the time depend on the amount of wings you are eating? That will help you determine what goes on your X and what goes on your Y axis. Does wing depend on minutes, or does minutes depend on wings? Then down below for number 4, you are writing an equation for each student. This is using the same form that we did earlier in the week, D equals R times T, but this time our variables are not, or our two variables are not distance and time. They're something else. So you're going to have to identify that with a key showing what the variables represent. This last page is just interpreting what you've done on the first 2 pages and having you really reflect on what you observed on the graph and in the table and using your knowledge of the rates and the equations. I just want to draw your attention to number 7, and it's asking for 2 things to let you know that these relationships are linear. First of all, they are all linear. All 4 of those people represent linear relationships in their eating contest. So I know that they are all linear. Take a minute to look for the patterns in the graph and in the table. Think about what the equation means and what that unit rate means to help you determine how it is in fact linear, how in a graph it would form a straight line. If you're struggling at all, I would even do some searching online to see what linear means and how it is represented in your table, your graph, and your equation. So this one is for you to do a little exploring yourself. Don't worry, I wasn't going to leave you without a joke of the day. So my joke for you is, what do you call a pig that knows karate? Drum roll, please. Pork chop. Have a good weekend, and I hope the packet goes well. See me at Flex if you have any questions. Otherwise, I expect it to be done Monday, first thing in class. Also, be sure that you have corrected your ACE homework. I'm also going to collect that on Monday in class. Have a great weekend, and I hope you enjoyed your first video lesson.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.